Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of September and also the lunar eclipse that we have coming up in Pisces on the 17th or 18th of September, depending on where in the world you live. And we're already well within eclipse energies, I'm sure you know. It really begins about a month before the eclipse. And the consequences of the eclipses often last for up to 6 months after the exact date. So going to be talking much more about that. But just before we get to that, mid-month, we have a very positive aspect, actually, on the 14th and 15th of the month. We have Venus trine to Jupiter. This is one of the most favorable aspects in astrology. Venus is in its own sign. It's at 20 degrees of Libra. Gemini is at 20 degrees of, Jupiter's at 20 degrees of Gemini. And see where these points fall in your chart. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website, go to the link below, get the 2-part video series, and you can watch that hundreds of times, literally. With every update I do, you can easily and quickly, it takes you from zero in your understanding, and you can find these points in your chart and start to understand at a deeper level what these updates mean for you. But usually see where Venus falls, 20 of Libra, see where Jupiter falls at 20 of Gemini. And at either end of that, you could experience either just a really lovely social time, see which houses they're falling in, or it could be some success or recognition or even abundance, actually, where Jupiter's falling. So see how that works. But it's very positive and very often about positive times in relationship as well, of all kinds. So now we move on to the lunar eclipse. Now, the lunar eclipse is happening on the 17th at 7:34 p.m. Pacific, and it's happening on the 18th at 3:34 on the clock, UK time, on the next day, the 18th. It's at 25 degrees, 40 minutes of Pisces. So again, see where that falls in your chart. Now, this isn't a total lunar eclipse. The only total eclipse we're going to have this year was back in April, on the 8th of April. As you might remember, that was a total solar eclipse. So this is partial, but it's a supermoon. And what a supermoon means is that the moon is much closer to the Earth in its orbit. Now, always with eclipses, we have stronger seismic potential, but even more so when it's a supermoon. So this is going to be very strong. And eclipses are always pivot points, really. They bring about permanent changes. I mean, full moons are the key time in the month. It's the peak of the moon cycle, and a lunar eclipse is a really big full moon. They're the times when we can release things, let things go that aren't for our highest good. It's that kind of a feeling, shed things from the past. But that is much bigger with a lunar eclipse. So it really is a time of endings before you start the new beginnings. So see where 2540 of Pisces falls, as I say. Which house is that in? What's ending? What's closing for you? There's a sense of fatedness or destiny with eclipses, very often permanent changes. So the last time we had any eclipses in Pisces or Virgo, because remember, for the last 18 months or so, we've been in an Aries-Libra eclipse period. The last time we had any eclipses in Virgo or Pisces was between March 2016 and February 2017. So if you look back to that 11 months and see which houses those eclipses were activating for you, then actually the North Node was in Virgo. Now it's still in Aries, but in January about to move into Pisces, so the nodes were the other way around. But nevertheless, with the eclipses, you always get two opposing houses, a pair of houses that are highlighted, activated at the time of the eclipses. So is it your 4th and 10th house? Is it your home and career? Is your first and seventh house is very much about, me versus we, relationship axis. So it's very, very helpful to know where this falls in your own chart, and looking back to March 2016 to February 2017, if you can remember that, that will give you some indication of how this might work this time around. Always with astrology, we are vortexing upwards, we are spiraling upwards. It won't be exactly the same as last time because our consciousness is shifting, in fact, shifting so incredibly quickly at this time. Now, as you will see in a moment, I'll show the chart, but because this is in the Pisces-Virgo axis, with the Sun in Virgo, the Moon in Pisces, this axis, as I've spoken about in the past, is very much related to health. That's one of the big themes about this. The Moon, as you will see in a moment, is conjunct Neptune, which strengthens, because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, it strengthens this Piscean element even more. Both Neptune and Pisces are to do with the immune system, the blood, the lymph. Virgo is to do with purifying, detoxifying. It's got a lot to do with the gut and the microbiome. Neptune and Pisces are very linked to toxicity, either in ourselves or toxicity and pollution in the seas, the oceans, our water. A lot could come up at this time about the water. It could be a very peak time for flooding because it's a supermoon. The moon, has got a much greater gravitational pull on the earth and the tides. And just the fact it's very linked to Neptune and Pisces can highlight things around flooding, water, as I say, pollution, toxicity of water, our drinking water. It could be all around that kind of thing. Pisces and Neptune are also related, as I've spoken about recently, to the media, any illusion, any deceptions, any lies, that kind of thing. And because the supermoon is so close, this lunar eclipse supermoon is so close to the Earth, it will appear bigger and brighter. It will shine a very bright light on all of those things I've just talked about. But it is also very related to healing and very much using your gut, your microbiome to heal as well. It's related beautifully to creativity, to meditation, to music, to dance. There's a heightened spirituality with this potentially. And try and see everything in a spiritual context as we go, well, from now on, actually, not just at this lunar eclipse, but instead of seeing yourself as a human being, see yourself as a spiritual being. Tune in more to your dreams, very related to Neptune and Pisces. If you don't do that already, keep a dream diary next to your bed. And when you wake up, don't open your eyes, don't move. Recall the dream first before you move, or you open your eyes, and then it's easier to remember and you can write it down. Otherwise, as soon as you open your eye, or you move, it's gone. They're very ethereal. So, but it's also related to a sense of connection to source, to oneness, actually to bliss. To me, it's connected to bliss. I can drop into bliss very easily in nature. So bliss, being in a bliss bubble, this sense of your unique essence, shedding the personality and just getting back to your unique essence, which is ethereal. It's a spiritual thing. It's a soul-based thing. It's that kind of a feeling. The more you can drop into bliss, into stillness, into silence in your day, all of these energies are really beautiful for that. So let's now look at the chart for this lunar eclipse supermoon. Hopefully you can see this. So I've set this chart for England. This is where I live. So it's happening very early hours. It will actually be on the clock because we're still in British summertime, 3:34 a.m. on the 18th of September. So as well as all the things I've talked about, yes, we can see that the sun is in Virgo here opposing the moon. in Pisces, 25-40, but the moon is conjunct Neptune and the sun is opposing Neptune. So all of those things I just talked about are relevant to that opposition. But in addition, thinking of watery themes, we have dwarf planet Salacia at 10:47 of Aries. So it's quite tightly conjunct this north node here at 7 of Aries. Now, gradually they are separating because the nodal axis moves retrograde, as you know. So it will start to move into Pisces in January. But Salacia, as you will have heard me talk many times, is the dwarf planets that's related to the shimmering sunlight and moonlight on the sea. I believe it's very related to photonic light. And this quality of light that we are increasingly embodying as we shed density and move towards the light body. But also, I believe, because Salacia is actually, and the North Node are in a cardinal grand cross. So follow me through with this. So Salacia is conjunct the North Node here. North Node is always opposite the South Node. It's an axis. I've drawn in the South Node here at 7 of Libra. This is a very tight cardinal grand cross because the nodal axis is square, and Salacia is square to Mars in Cancer. I'm going to talk a lot about that in a moment. At 7 of Cancer, Mars is opposing Ceres at 8 of Capricorn. So this is forming a big square, a cardinal grand cross, a big square. Now, I've talked recently how Ceres is related to our grains, our harvests, our food production, our agriculture. And in many areas of the world, that is for various reasons, extreme weather situations, that is quite stressed at the moment. And that's being highlighted in this, in Ceres being square to the nodal axis. You know, it's coming up in our collective consciousness strongly. And there may even be some anger around this. Mars is anger, you know, assertiveness, particularly because it's in Cancer. Cancer is literally feeding people. It comes up in the charts of chefs quite a lot. You know, they are nurturing people by literally feeding them. So it's related to an emotional nurturing and a feeling of emotional security, but it's also related to literal feeding. So we have issues around food, agriculture, food production coming up at this time. That, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel because literally sort of thing, because Salacia being light in this grand cross, I believe is related to our greater understanding of different qualities of light, different colors of light that create optimum plant growth. And a long time ago, I referred to how some growers are using different light colors, different LED lights, because they've determined that some vegetables and plants like different colors. You know, they like blue as opposed to green or red or whatever. They've determined the optimum lighting color for that plant to grow well. And I think we're going to discover a whole ton more about that and the importance of light, the importance of sunlight, but the importance also of light in general and how we can boost our food growth. And this may, thinking of Salacia, because it's mermaid energy, wife of Neptune in myth, this may be related to something connected to the deep oceans, the deep seas. This lunar eclipse in Pisces. I feel profoundly that our really nutritious food sources in future, a lot of them may come from the deep oceans that we've barely discovered yet. You know, forms of algae, new species, because they're in such deep water. They're highly nutritious and clean, unpolluted. And, you know, I happened to be talking to a nutritionist yesterday, and he was saying one of the most pure forms of unpolluted forms of fish is a fish called the Arctic char. because it comes from so deep in the ocean. So I just think there's a whole bunch of stuff around this that can help us understand highly nutritious, concentrated food that we don't necessarily have to eat a lot of, but provides us with everything we need. Anyway, so that's a whole other theme that we'll be exploring more in future. But I want to talk now about Mars in Cancer. So I've got a lot to say about this. Mars enters Cancer. Mars normally, it's got about a 2-year orbit, normally stays in a sign for 6 to 7 weeks. In this case, Mars is going to be in Cancer and up to 6 degrees of Leo, if we include that little bit in Leo, first 6 degrees, for almost 8 months. That's incredible. That's a very long time compared to its normal orbit. So I'd like you to look in your chart, see where the sign of Cancer is, and also up to 6 degrees of Leo. That will probably straddle 2 houses for you. Houses are areas of life in your birth chart. Those houses, or if it's one, big house, going to be very activated in the next 8 months. So let me describe the movements of Mars, and then I'll talk about what Mars means in those areas. Mars has moved into Cancer on the 4th of September. On the 4th of November, it will tip into Leo and start to move into Leo and actually move up to 6 degrees of Leo. However, it moves retrograde on the 6th of December, which means it will start to go backwards in relation to what we're looking at from the Earth. I understand, by the way, that is close to when the US election is certified. I think that could be incredibly interesting. If we have a US election, there could be some backtracking either on the vote itself, that could be contested, or some unraveling of the person who is elected if there is an election. This gets very messy. But I just think it's very interesting that Mars starts to move retrograde on the 6th of December, which, as I understand it from my humble perspective in the UK, is round about the time that US election is certified. It then starts to move direct again on the 24th of February, but it doesn't and re-enter Cancer, and it doesn't move out of Cancer until the 18th of April 2025. I mean, that's just incredible. So let me talk about what Mars in Cancer means. Very often, natally, if people have Mars in Cancer, there has been in early childhood, some aggression or hostility in the early home. And as a child, if you have Mars in Cancer natally, you are hyper aware, highly tuned to any hostility or aggression coming at you or your loved ones. So it's a question of almost you strike before you're struck, if I can say that. It's a highly protective instinct for you and also for your family, your loved ones, and even your homeland. This comes up actually quite often with people who go into the military because they want to protect the homeland. And so it's a highly attuned, hyper-aware, protective instinct, but it may work against you in a way because you strike before you're struck. You kind of over-imagined the hostility or any aggression coming towards you. So you have to kind of take a breath first, because Mars can be a bit impulsive to protect. Hope I'm being clear here, because it's very important. So wherever it's falling in your chart, there's this sense of activation, a lot happening in that chart, but a very strong protective instinct coming in. When it's briefly in Leo, which it will only be, I think it enters on the 4th of November. And then, let me just check actually. Let me just check to be absolutely sure. It enters on the 4th of November. Yeah. And it re-enters, it goes into Leo on the 4th of November. It re-enters Cancer on the 6th of January, but stays in Cancer then until the 18th of April. Quite remarkable. So really, really look at what's being activated there. By the way, if you are born with Mars being retrograde in your chart, this is often a really productive time when it's retrograde. You know, it's interesting. There's so much on social media about Mercury retrograde. I was born with Mercury retrograde, and it doesn't help me back so far in terms of communication. But I tend to get very productive during those periods. So, you know, just see them as they are, and particularly with Mercury retrograde, I'd reduce the amount of hype, because it's very often you thinking the printer will jam and the car will break down that makes those things happen, because that's your belief filter, as it were. Okay, so other things I want to point out here. Mercury is conjunct the dwarf planet Orcus. I've talked about Orcus in the past. This is the Etruscan god of the underworld who punishes those who break their sacred oaths, the sacred law. And that may be related to health here because it's in Virgo, and punishes them, takes them down to the underworld. It's very interesting here, very interesting indeed. This is such a complex chart that Mercury is being opposed here tightly by Saturn. Now, Mercury is where we want to, in Virgo, get the facts exact, get them right, get them precise, you know, nail it down. What's the truth? What's the exact correct thing? But there is some obstacle, perhaps. You know, Pisces can create a fog over things, or what's true, what's not, or a squishing of that clarity that we could get in Virgo. And that's particularly true because Saturn is in this semi-square to Pluto, which is going to run for some time because they're both quite slow moving. It becomes tighter at the Libra equinox, which I'll talk about in another separate video. But Mercury is also sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees Pluto. So we have the two planets, Saturn and Pluto, that are linked to power and control, are hitting Mercury in Virgo, who is endeavoring to get the facts right. So this is very interesting. There seems to be some, you know, squishing or obstacle. So there's going to be, you know, and because Neptune's in Pisces, close to that anaretic degree, there are going to be so many layers of what's true, what's not. But as I mentioned in a recent video, we had that incredibly powerful conjunction between Saturn and Pluto, 12th of January 2020, which set off the whole pandemic. And this was all around top-down power. And this is the first time we have had any hard aspect between Saturn and Pluto since that time, since January 2020. So, you know, how far have we got in those efforts that were introduced, you know, that, you know, those top-down structures in January 2020? And it's another kind of reality check-in. And are we getting some echo of that? You know, it's going to be very, very interesting because we're in a different place now with our consciousness. I hope I am making sense here. But that's a very interesting aspect here because it's also enlarged, if you like, literally, really, by Saturn being square to Jupiter. Now, this Saturn square to Jupiter is really running up until June 2025. It was exact at the new moon in Virgo. It's exact again on the 24th of December. It's exact again on the 15th of June next year. But nevertheless, it's operational through this whole period until June next year. So I've got a whole video on how that might affect you personally. I'll put the link for that video again below so you can study that. I don't want to repeat all of that because it was quite a long video. But as I've mentioned, this is about legality, legitimacy of top-down structures. It could be around some legal issue because Jupiter's always connected to the law. Jupiter's connected to truth, and truth that may be coming out on social media, Gemini. But again, there could be some in the square to Saturn rules or regulations or limitations around that. And I think we're going to see some big, big, big themes around freedom of speech, human rights, civil rights, that kind of thing. And that is really going to be massively enlarged once Pluto moves back into Aquarius for 20 years, pretty much on November the 19th. And the reason I say that is historically, when I've looked back and done a lot of research about this, there has been some suppression of freedom while Pluto has been in Capricorn, particularly the last few degrees. If I look back to big history, deep history, in 1525, when Pluto was in Capricorn then, that was the first time that African slaves were introduced to the US. I mean, it's just unthinkable, this, isn't it? Slavery, because it continued until the late 1700s, which I'll talk about in a moment. But, this whole thing was unthinkable. But anyway, it began, if we're looking at repeating cycles, while Pluto was in Capricorn. Then Pluto, in its last move into Aquarius, historically, was from 1777 until 1798. In 1778, 1 year after it had entered in its last cycle, Virginia in the US was the first state to ban slavery. In 1792, Pluto was still in Aquarius then, Denmark was the first country to ban slavery. So while Pluto was in Aquarius, there was some unraveling of, this most extreme you can imagine loss of freedom and human rights. So those are going to be big themes, I think, going forwards. I'm thinking of big picture stuff at this point. But going back to Jupiter Saturn, this is about the future, expanding to the future. This is about pulling back to the past. This is about youth, because Gemini is very linked to youth. Saturn is linked to Kronos, Lord of Time, linked to old age. So it's young versus old. And I think we could see some interesting themes coming forth about that. But interestingly as well, so much to say on this chart, Jupiter is actually forming a T-square to this lunar eclipse. So the moon at 25, Pisces, sun at 25, Virgo, both squaring Jupiter at 20 of Gemini. That's an operational T-square. So there is going to be a desire for people to speak out. Jupiter wants to enlarge, magnify in all kinds of areas of life, but particularly social media, I'd suggest, because that's very linked to Gemini, and speak out confidently, maybe even overconfidently and extravagantly on social media. So again, I would just ask you to be clear, be sure with these layers of smoke and mirror that you're sure of what you're saying, and just be measured. Don't try and step back from judgment. Jupiter, opinionation, very linked to Jupiter, because that leads to polarization and division and separation and the I'm right, you're wrong. Try and be objective, measured, just peaceful. Do it from a kind of eagle's perch observer point of view. And as I so often say, that is a great place to be as we go through these very eventful few months. which are going to be extremely, extremely colourful. So, something else I'd like to highlight here, which is very favourable actually, is we've actually got a grand Earth trine between Uranus, 27 of Taurus, Sun at 25 of Virgo, and Pluto at 29 of Capricorn. And this will become a little bit tighter in a few days' time at the Libra equinox, so I'll talk about that in the next video. But I see this as actually being really quite favourable because it's a grand trine related to Earth. So this is related to making things real. I think it's very related again to innovation in agriculture, food production, etc., because that's very linked to Uranus in Taurus. And also I think there could be new developments in digital currencies. Doesn't need an astrologer to tell you that. But these new developments could accelerate at this time. And I do feel that the direction of travel will be decentralized because that's linked to Aquarian energy, which we're going to have for about 20 years, as I say, from November onwards. Because this acceleration in the development of digital currencies, we may even end up with microcurrencies, really, in my view, astrologically, have to take place while Uranus is in Taurus. And Uranus is only in Taurus for another couple of years. It moves fully out of Taurus because Taurus is related to currencies, money. It moves fully out of Taurus in 2026. So that's why I think we will have a lot of change around that area. So just, be careful in your currency choices as we move through these times. The other thing that accentuates currencies is that Venus, in its own sign of Libra, so it's strong, is square to Pluto. That square becomes tighter again at the Libra equinox, which I'll talk about next time. But this could be some fundamental change with our currencies, our wealth, our money in some way. So I think those are the main themes that I wanted to bring up at this time. There's, such a lot happening here. Personally, if you have any planets, particularly from about 24 to the end of Pisces, 24 degrees to the end of Pisces, 24 to the end of Virgo, any planets or angles, you're going to feel this lunar eclipse most strongly and personally. Other things I want to just highlight here as well. I'm going to stop sharing here. If I look at the chart for the astrocartography for this lunar eclipse, interestingly, it's running straight down north-south through Australia and Papua New Guinea. Now, today, I'm filming this on the 2nd of September, just a few hours ago. We had a very strong earthquake of 6.4 magnitude, which was, I think, about 44 kilometers deep. It was strong, it was deep in Papua New Guinea. And we are already into eclipse energy now. So I hope that is kind of used up, shall I say, the lunar eclipse energy for that geography. But I know because of people who, saw that and were living in Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, were replying and saying, we've had extreme weather. I haven't seen this kind of weather in 41 years, one lady said. We've had, extremely high winds, cyclones, incredibly heavy rain, storms. So that was really the backlash, I think, from that strong earthquake in Papua New Guinea. So let us hope that there isn't going to be any more drama in that geography, but it is highlighted for the lunar eclipse on the 17th, 18th. But as I say, we're already within that energy. It also runs north-south by astrocartography through eastern Brazil, and also it is angular on the western Canadian coast and the western US coast. It's just skimming the coast of the US as well. Interestingly, Mars is on the IC, the base of the chart, the land, running straight up through California, north from there through the other US states and into Canada. It's strongly aspecting the Mercury for the chart for NATO, and I will put the details of that chart below this video for astrologers to take a look at. Fascinatingly, I came across the chart for London, which I've never actually seen before. And the chart for London, and again, I'll put the details of that before beneath for astrologers, was based on the building of the first bridge, I think, over the Thames in 1824. And the building of that bridge became kind of crucial for London to become a major commercial centre. And London is obviously the seat of our UK government. And it's very interesting that this lunar eclipse is almost exactly on the sun, SUN, of that chart for London in 1824. And I just kind of find that fascinating. Now, whether anything dramatic will happen to London or the government in London at that eclipse, interestingly, it's in the 11th house of politics in that 1824 eclipse. But let us just see what unfolds. I love to go down rabbit holes and see correlations and see whether they manifest in the real world. But suffice to say that the energies are really, really ramping up because we are in a phenomenally accelerated period of humanity, no rehearsal. We're just full steam ahead. And that is why we are doing this through our physicality. And that's unique. That's never happened before. We are literally transmuting the photonic light, the solar flares, the incredible new information from the far galaxies through our physical body to shed density, to move towards the light body, to become a more galactic human, a biological new human, which is something that fascinates me. I'm going to be digging into a little more. And so even though those physical symptoms are very uncomfortable, tinnitus, aches and pains, insomnia, chronic fatigue, we're all, believe me, I'm feeling it too. Astrologers don't escape. We are all going through that, but try and welcome them in as evidence of our evolution, because they are. That's what's happening for us. And just before I started to film this, I very much respect the channeling of a chap called Daniel Scranton, who some of you may know. And this channeling just popped up today. This was from the Arcturian Council, and I'd like to quote it because he's talking about, the Arcturian Council are talking about the energies for September. This is word for word quoting him. You are returning home to the whole self. You are returning home to the galactic self, the higher self, the oversoul self. It is a journey with many steps, and the steps you will take forward in and throughout the month of September will be gigantic ones. And astrologically, I can see that. The months of September, October, November, December are huge. This is huge, colourful, dramatic astrology that we are living through. But the more you can detach from that drama, almost that you're watching a movie. Yes, that's very dramatic. Yes, that's very eventful. Yes, that's very colourful. But you're kind of watching it, and increasingly you're detaching from it. Yes, it is happening in one reality, but you're kind of pulling away, and it kind of feels, I said this in the last update, it kind of feels like old energy to you. You're watching something playing out that is old energy. And so it's attracting less and less of your attention. And if you can get to that perspective, that would be wonderful. Because what we need to do is use all of our available energy to lock on to love as our docking station, to lock on to love, joy, compassion, gratitude, peace, joy, all of those wonderful emotions that I encourage people to experience, to welcome in new earth more quickly in our Sunday meditations. People are having the most incredible visions and experiences. It brings me to tears because people write back to me, and I usually post these if they come in. I'm most active, apart from YouTube, on Facebook, and it is deeply moving to see people all over the world connecting with their hearts and having these visions with a lot of telepathy happening between them as well. We're doing this all for free as ordinary people, but we are magnetizing in New Earth when we do that. And the more we can make that our focus, the faster it's going to arrive. So just lock on to love as your docking station. Starve out the scary, love in the good. And we really are, as Daniel Scranton's channeling suggests today, taking gigantic steps in our evolution, and try and feel excited. Move from any kind of fear to feel excitement that, yes, although we're dealing with the invisible, we actually always have. We've always created from the invisible. And feel excited that you are connecting, you're making heart connections to people all over the world in your family of frequency who are with you in this completely unique experience of transmuting this high frequency light energy through our physical bodies to become a different biological being by the time we get to the end of these next few years. God bless. A lot in there today, an awful lot. I hope it made sense. I covered a huge amount of ground. You can always replay it many times. Hope it's helped you, and I will do a separate video in the next couple of days on the Libra equinox for you too. God bless. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.